Everything shifted the day Lucas walked through our front door. What should have been a simple act of family support slowly unraveled into something far more dangerous. A web of unspoken tension, lingering glances, and choices that once made can never be undone. Between restraint and desire, loyalty and longing, my world began to tilt in ways I never imagined possible. And when Sophia, my husband's sister, stepped in unexpectedly, the fragile balance I was clinging to shattered completely. "Hello, darling. I don't know what brought you here, but I promise you this, once you step into my story, you won't leave unchanged. This isn't just a confession. It's a descent. A slow burn that will make you question how thin the line truly is between right and irresistible." My life used to feel predictable, safe, like a quiet river moving in one steady direction. Until the day Lucas called his father. "My name is Emma. I'm 55 years old, living in San Diego. Married for over 3 decades to Daniel, a disciplined, hardworking man who built a private transportation company from nothing. His dedication gave us comfort, security and distance. The business always came first. Late nights, out-of-town trips, phone calls that pulled him away even during dinner. I told myself I understood. When Daniel mentioned that Lucas needed a place to stay after his divorce, I didn't hesitate. Of course he could stay with us. He was family. What kind of woman would refuse her husband's son in a difficult moment? I truly believed nothing could disturb the steady rhythm of my life. I was wrong. The moment Lucas arrived, something inside me stirred, something I hadn't felt in years. The boy I remembered had disappeared. In his place stood a man tall, composed, self-assured. There was a stillness in him, a quiet intensity that felt almost magnetic. "Thank you for letting me stay, Emma," he said, holding my gaze just a second longer than necessary. It was subtle, almost innocent, and yet my pulse betrayed me. I blamed it on surprise, on nostalgia, on the shock of seeing time transform someone so completely. But as he stepped inside, carrying his suitcase as though he had always belonged there, the air in the house shifted. That first evening at dinner, Lucas spoke about his divorce with that unsettling calm. No bitterness, no visible heartbreak. Just a measured tone, as if he had already processed every emotion and packed it away neatly. But I noticed the pauses. The way his fingers tightened slightly around his glass when Daniel asked certain questions. The way his eyes drifted toward me when silence fell between us. "You seem different," I told him carefully. "Stronger, somehow." He smiled, slow, unreadable. "People change when they lose something," he replied. The words lingered. In the days that followed, Lucas settled in quickly. Too quickly. His presence filled the house in ways Daniel's absence had left hollow. He fixed small things without being asked. Reached high shelves with effortless ease. Offered to help in the garden. He moved through our home confidently, but never arrogantly. And yet there was an undercurrent. Sometimes I would feel his gaze before I saw it. Sometimes our hands brushed when passing a plate or sharing a tool, and the contact felt charged, not inappropriate, not deliberate, but not accidental either. At night I lay awake questioning myself. Was this loneliness speaking? Was it simply the shock of change disrupting my routine? Or was there something far more dangerous unfolding beneath the surface? The tension wasn't explosive, it was quiet, persistent, growing in the spaces between words. And then came the moment that truly unsettled me. One afternoon, Daniel was away on business. Lucas and I were alone in the living room. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust particles in the air like suspended secrets. "You seem restless lately," Lucas said softly. I laughed it off. "Don't be ridiculous," but he didn't smile. Instead, he stepped closer, not touching me, not crossing any visible boundary, just close enough that I felt the warmth of his presence. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said. That was the first time I felt fear. Not of him, of myself. Because deep down, I knew something had already begun, something fragile, forbidden, and impossible to ignore. And I hadn't yet realized how far it would go, or who would pay the price had it finally unraveled. Without thinking, I had told him he seemed different. He responded with a smile that lingered just long enough to feel intentional. "And you haven't changed at all, Emma. You're just as elegant as ever." The words were simple, polite even, but something about the way he said them, steady, unflinching, left a quiet imprint on me. With Daniel gone most of the time, the rhythm of the house had subtly shifted. Conversations felt longer, silences felt heavier. The next morning, I tried to ground myself in routine. Cleaning, rearranging furniture. Anything to quiet the unfamiliar restlessness inside me. Lucas was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs, moving with relaxed confidence as he prepared breakfast. "Can you give me a hand with this cabinet?" I asked casually. "It's heavier than it looks." He agreed immediately. We positioned ourselves on either side, pushing together. For a moment, it was nothing more than shared effort, until our hands brushed. It was brief. Accidental. And yet my pulse reacted as if something far more deliberate had happened. When we finished, I caught him looking at me, not boldly, not inappropriately, but with a focus that felt searching. As though he were trying to understand something unspoken between us. "Thanks for your help," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. But the air had changed. That night, sleep avoided me. I lay awake, aware of the quiet hum of the house, aware of him in the room down the hallway. The distance between us felt both small and impossible. I tried to dismiss the thoughts, to anchor myself in reason. This is temporary. This is harmless, yet my mind betrayed me. Sometime after midnight, I rose to get a glass of water. As I passed his door, I heard soft music drifting into the hallway. The door was slightly ajar. I should have kept walking. Instead, I paused. Through the narrow opening, I saw him sitting on the edge of his bed, a notebook resting against his knee. His expression was distant, absorbed, focused in a way that made him seem detached from the world around him. There was something unexpectedly vulnerable about that image. For a moment, I felt like an intruder, as though I were witnessing a private layer of him not meant for me. And yet I couldn't look away. The faint glow of the lamp cast shadows along his face. He looked thoughtful, quiet, not the composed man from dinner, not the subtly confident presence from earlier, but someone carrying weight beneath the surface. I stepped away before he noticed me. But the image stayed. Days passed, and instead of fading, the tension sharpened. It wasn't loud. It didn't in glances that lasted a second too long. In pauses where words might have been safer than silence. One afternoon, the sun was high and relentless. Lucas was in the backyard, working out near the patio. I stepped outside with a glass of lemonade, telling myself it was nothing more than courtesy. He was shirtless, sweat tracing the lines of effort across his skin. There was strength there, yes, but also intensity. A focus that made the air feel charged. When I offered him the glass, his fingers closed around it slowly, brushing mine in the process. This time, the contact didn't feel accidental. "Thank you," he said quietly. There was something in his voice, lower, almost contemplative, that unsettled me. I became acutely aware of how alone we were. Of how quiet the neighborhood seemed. Of how easy it would be to misunderstand proximity for permission. I stepped back first. "Don't overdo it," I said lightly, clinging to normalcy. But as I turned toward the house, I felt his gaze follow me. And that frightened me more than anything. Because the tension between us was no longer imagined. It was mutual. And somewhere deep inside, I began to understand that the real danger wasn't what Lucas might do. It was what I might allow. "Thank you, Emma," he said again, but this time there was something different in his voice, softer, deeper, almost weighted. The sound of my name on his lips unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. Heat rushed to my cheeks, and I retreated into the house, telling myself I was overreacting. But denial was becoming harder to hold on to. This wasn't imagination anymore, it wasn't loneliness playing tricks on me. Something was shifting between us. That evening, I busied myself in the kitchen, scrubbing already clean countertops, rearranging utensils that didn't need rearranging. The steady rhythm of chores usually calmed me. Not tonight, I sensed him before I saw him. The refrigerator door opened behind me. "Looking for something?" I asked without turning. Lucas replied. Then, after a brief pause, "Need any help?" He stepped closer than necessary. "No, I'm almost done," I answered, my voice steadier than that he didn't move away. I became acutely aware of the space, or rather, the lack of it, between us. The warmth of his presence behind me made it difficult to think clearly. The air felt thicker, charged with something neither of us was naming. When I finally turned, intending to end the moment with polite conversation, I found his eyes already fixed on mine, unwavering. "Emma," he said quietly, "I really appreciate everything you've done for me." Simple words, and yet the way he said them felt layered, almost intimate. Time seemed to hesitate. For a fraction of a second, I forgot how to respond. Forgot who I was supposed to be. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but dangerous. Then, just as suddenly, he stepped back. A faint smile curved at the edge of his mouth, as if he understood more than he was revealing. And I stood there, breath uneven, realizing something undeniable. The line between permissible and forbidden was no longer clear. It was thinning. Can you feel it? This is where everything begins to change. Because tension like this doesn't disappear, it evolves. It pushes, it tests. And when boundaries blur, consequences follow. If you think you know what happens next, you probably don't. Later that afternoon, as if fate had perfect timing, my phone rang. "Sophia, Daniel's sister. I'm stopping by," she announced cheerfully. "It's been ages since we've had a proper visit." Her tone was light, but something beneath it felt probing. Sophia had always possessed an uncanny ability to read a room, to notice what others overlooked. By the time she arrived, Lucas was home. He opened the door just as she stepped onto the porch. For a brief second, I watched from the hallway. "Lucas." Sophia's eyes widened. "You've grown so much, I almost didn't recognize you." Her smile was warm but observant. Lucas greeted her politely, composed as ever. Yet there was something in the way Sophia's gaze shifted between us. A flicker. A pause slightly longer than casual. She hugged me tightly when she entered. "You look flushed," she murmured softly near my ear. "Everything all right?" I forced a laugh. "Of course," but her eyes lingered. Throughout the afternoon, conversation flowed easily, too easily. Sophia asked questions about Lucas's adjustment, about Daniel's travel schedule, about how I had been spending my time lately. Each question felt harmless on the surface, yet beneath them I sensed evaluation. At one point, I caught her watching us, Lucas handing me a glass of water, our fingers nearly touching again. Nearly, her expression shifted ever so slightly. Not accusation. Not yet. But awareness. And in that moment, I understood something with chilling clarity. The tension between Lucas and me was no longer confined to stolen glances and quiet spaces. Someone else had begun to notice. And when secrets begin to surface, they rarely stay contained. She exclaimed his name warmly and pulled him into a hug that lingered just a second too long. Lucas smiled, polite, slightly stiff, the kind of charm that hides discomfort without exposing it. But I always noticed. From that moment on, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't obvious. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle tightening of the air. As though something invisible had entered the room and taken a seat among us. We gathered in the living room, the late afternoon light spilling across the floor. Sophia carried herself with effortless confidence, as she always did. But today there was something sharper beneath it, an alertness. Her attention settled on Lucas. "It's incredible how much you've changed," she said, studying him openly. "You must be driving the girls at your gym wild." She held his gaze deliberately. Lucas chuckled, modest but visibly uneasy, shifting slightly in his seat. The reaction only seemed to amuse her more. I attempted to redirect the conversation, asking about her work, her recent travels, but Sophia had already chosen her focus. Her remarks remained playful on the surface, yet each one carried an undertone I couldn't ignore. Eventually she suggested opening a bottle of wine. "It's been far too long since we've had a proper family evening," she said smoothly, already rising to retrieve glasses. I hesitated just briefly, not wanting to appear tense or out of place. Lucas accepted his glass with an easy smile. The wine softened the edges of conversation, but it sharpened something else. Topics grew more personal, more intimate. Sophia had always possessed a talent for steering discussions into territory that felt both fascinating and dangerous. She asked questions that sounded harmless, until you noticed the precision behind them. At one point, she turned directly to Lucas. "So tell me," she said lightly, crossing one leg over the other. "How do you handle all the attention from your clients?" Lucas laughed, attempting to deflect. "It's just business." "Oh, I'm sure," Sophia replied. tilting her head. But with that kind of presence, I wouldn't be surprised if some of them wanted more than just training advice. Her tone was teasing. Her eyes were not. Lucas responded casually, but I caught something, a flicker. His gaze shifted briefly toward me, as if measuring my reaction. The room felt smaller, warmer. Words began blending with glances, each exchange layered with meanings no one dared articulate. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, acutely aware of how close we all were seated. Then Sophia did something unexpected. She rose from her place across the couch and moved to sit beside Lucas. Close beside him. "It's fascinating how life reshapes us," she said thoughtfully, placing a hand lightly on his arm. "Sometimes divorce changes a man. Makes him more aware." Her touch lingered. Lucas remained composed, but tension rippled beneath his calm exterior. And I felt it, a sudden twist in my stomach I hadn't anticipated. Jealousy. No, that wasn't possible. Was it? Sophia glanced at me briefly, almost imperceptibly. And in that glance I sensed something unmistakable. She was observing, testing, perhaps even provoking. "Emma," she said casually, without removing her hand. "You must have noticed the difference too, living in the same house and all." The question landed heavier than it should have. I forced a measured smile. "People grow. Less," she replied softly. "They do." Silence followed. Not scandalous, not overt, but layered with something that hummed beneath the surface. And in that moment, clarity struck me like cold water. Sophia wasn't flirting carelessly. She was watching me. The wine, the comments, the proximity, it wasn't random. It was calculated. As though she were nudging invisible boundaries just to see who would react first. And suddenly, I no longer knew which tension was more dangerous. The one between Lucas and me, or the one Sophia had just introduced into the room. Her hand rested lightly on his shoulder. Lucas looked startled, but he didn't move away. From across the room, I felt the shift instantly. Like the air pressure had changed. I tried to interject, forcing a nervous smile. Sophia always so direct. But she wasn't stopping. She turned toward me slowly and extended her hand. "Emma, come here. I don't bite." The invitation felt less like a request and more like a challenge. I stood, aware of how unsteady I suddenly felt, and crossed the room. When I sat down on Lucas's other side, I noticed his expression change. He looked caught between us. Confused, intrigued, and something else I didn't dare name. The space between the three of us seemed to shrink. Sophia leaned back slightly, studying both of us as if observing an experiment unfold. "Emma and I have always known how to share things," she said lightly, though her tone carried weight. "Haven't we?" Her words struck somewhere deep inside me. For weeks, I had been suppressing thoughts, dismissing feelings, pretending not to notice the undercurrent pulling at me. And now, sitting there between them, the tension no longer felt subtle. It felt undeniable. My breathing quickened. My thoughts blurred. I wasn't sure whether I was reacting to the wine, the proximity, or the dangerous electricity threading through the room. Sophia leaned closer to Lucas first, not recklessly, not dramatically, but with deliberate confidence. The gesture wasn't about affection. It was about control. Lucas didn't pull away, but his eyes flickered toward me. That look shattered something fragile inside me. Not jealousy. Not exactly. It was the realization that we had all stepped beyond innocence. When my hand brushed his, barely a touch, he turned fully toward me. The moment felt suspended, stretched thin with anticipation. No one spoke. The silence roared louder than any confession could. And in that silence, boundaries dissolved. What followed wasn't chaos. It was surrender to impulse, to curiosity, to emotions none of us had confronted honestly. The living room, once ordinary, safe, felt transformed. Not because of what happened physically, but because of what shifted internally. Restraint gave way to revelation. Masks slipped. Truth surfaced in glances and unsteady breaths. And yet, even in that charged moment, I sensed something else beneath Sophia's confidence. She wasn't losing control, she was guiding it. Watching us, testing us. Lucas stood at the center of it all, but not as the architect. As the catalyst. And somewhere deep within me, clarity cut through the hazy. This wasn't passion spiraling recklessly. It was a trap tightening quietly. And I had just stepped willingly into it. That night crossed a line none of us could pretend hadn't existed. It wasn't just about what happened. It was about what it awakened. The air in the house felt different the next morning. Heavier. Fragile. As though even the walls understood something irreversible had taken place. At breakfast, silence sat between us like an uninvited guest. Sophia stirred her coffee longer than necessary, her gaze fixed on the dark swirl in her cup. When she finally spoke, her tone was carefully measured. "I think I'll stay at a hotel next time I visit San Diego," she said with a strained laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. Lucas remained composed. Almost unsettlingly so. If anything, he seemed more confident, as if the uncertainty that once lingered him had dissolved overnight. I nodded politely at Sophia's comment, maintaining an exterior calm I did not feel. Inside, however, something churned. I could see it in her, the conflict. The regret, or was it something else? Fear. Lucas excused himself first, stepping outside as if the tension simply didn't apply to him. That afternoon, I retreated to the garage, pretending to organize old storage boxes. In truth, I needed distance, from the house, from my thoughts. From the undeniable reality that everything had shifted. Footsteps approached behind me. "Emma," Sophia said quietly. "Can we talk?" Her voice carried none of its earlier playfulness. Only seriousness. I turned to face her. She looked different, not weaker, but unsettled. As if the confidence she wore so easily had cracked. "I don't know how that happened," she began, crossing her arms as though holding herself together. "It was intense, overwhelming. But I can't stop thinking about it." She paused, searching my face. "This is wrong, Emma." The words landed hard. Wrong. A simple word, yet loaded with everything we had avoided confronting. I swallowed, forcing steadiness into my voice. "We're adults, Sophia. No one forced anything." "That's not what I mean," she replied quickly. It wasn't just impulse, it felt deliberate. Like we were being pulled somewhere. Her eyes sharpened. "Tell me honestly, how long has this tension been there?" The question cut deeper than I expected. Because the truth was, it hadn't begun that night, it had started in glances. In pauses. In silences that lingered too long. "I didn't plan this," I said quietly. "Neither did I," Sophia answered. "But Lucas, he knew exactly what he was doing." That thought unsettled me. Had he? Sophia stepped closer, lowering her voice. "One need to be careful. Daniel cannot find out. And if this continues, it won't just hurt him, it will destroy this family." Her words shifted the atmosphere again, from heat to consequence. For the first time since everything unfolded, I felt something stronger than desire. Fear. Because what had seemed like surrender in the moment now looked like the beginning of something far more complicated. Lucas appeared at the garage entrance just then, leaning casually against the frame. "Everything okay?" he asked smoothly. Sophia and I exchanged a glance. There was history in that look now. Shared knowledge. Shared risk. "Yes," I answered, though my voice felt thinner than usual. But Lucas's eyes lingered. Observant, unreadable. And in that moment, I understood something chilling. The night before may have been impulsive. What came next would not be. And the real danger wasn't the passion that had ignited. It was the secret we now shared. "I can't keep coming here as if nothing happened." Sophia's voice trembled despite her attempt to sound composed. Guilt and regret tangled in her expression, but beneath both, something unresolved lingered. I tried to steady her. "What happened was unexpected. But it doesn't have to define us, we can move forward." Even as I spoke, I felt the emptiness of those words. Some moments don't fade. They carve themselves into you. Sophia looked at me for a long second. As if searching for reassurance I couldn't genuinely provide. "You're stronger than I am," she murmured. I can't pretend it didn't mean something. That was the difference between us. She feared the meaning. I feared the consequences. While Sophia wrestled with guilt, Lucas carried himself with quiet resolve. Almost as if that night had clarified something for him rather than complicated it. After dinner, he found me alone in the kitchen, the steady sound of running water masking my thoughts. "Emma, can we talk?" The tone was familiar now. Correct. I dried my hands slowly and followed him into the living room, aware of how instinctively I responded to him. He didn't hesitate. "I can't stop thinking about you." There was no hesitation in his voice, no apology. The confession struck like sudden thunder, loud, disorienting. Impossible to ignore. For a moment, I struggled to find air. "Lucas," I said, careful to continue. But even as I tried to sound firm, I felt how fragile my resistance had become. He stepped closer, not aggressively, but with certainty. "This isn't just physical," he said quietly. "You feel it too. Every time we're near each other." And the worst part was he was right. The tension wasn't confined to stolen glances anymore. It lived in the silence between sentences. In the awareness that sparked whenever we shared space. The next morning, Sophia announced she would leave earlier than planned. "Thank you for everything, Emma," she said softly, embracing me. Her hug was brief, but heavy with unspoken understanding. Lucas walked her to the door with effortless composure, as if nothing had shifted. But I knew she wouldn't return anytime soon. Her absence left a strange stillness behind. A void, yes, but also a sense of exposure. Without her presence, the house felt too quiet. Too open, and with that openness came danger. Later that evening, I sat in the living room pretending to read. Though I hadn't turned the page in several minutes. My thoughts were restless, circling the same questions. Footsteps approached. Lucas entered and sat beside me. Closer than necessary, but not touching. "Emma," he began gently. The way he said my name made my heart tighten. "We can't keep pretending this is accidental." I closed the book slowly. "Pretending is the only thing keeping this from destroying everything," I replied. He studied me carefully, as though measuring how far I might bend. "Or maybe pretending is what's destroying us," he said. That word echoed louder than it should have. For the first time, I saw something beneath his confidence, not just desire, but intention. And that realization unsettled me more than anything else, because this was no longer about impulse, it was about choice. And choices, once made, rarely stay contained. Somewhere in the distance, my phone buzzed. Daniel's name lit up the screen. The timing felt almost cruel. I answered, forcing warmth into my voice, while Lucas remained seated beside me, silent, listening. Daniel said, "I might come home earlier than expected." My pulse stilled. Earlier, the word settled between me like a ticking clock. And suddenly, the tension wasn't just emotional. It was imminent. "I know this isn't easy, but you need to hear me," he said, his voice sharper, heavier than usual. There was a weight to his words, a sincerity that caught me off guard. "I can't explain it. Since I arrived, something has stirred inside me. Something I've never felt before. I don't want this to end here." His confession was tangled with a plea, raw and fragile. I tried to steady myself. "Lucas, this has to stop. Daniel trusts us. If this goes any further, it could destroy everything." Even as I spoke, I felt my own conviction cracking. That night, lying in the dark, sleep felt impossible. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. The door to my room groaned as it opened. And there he was, Lucas, his gaze holding a language words could never reach. "I can't stop thinking about you," he whispered. I stayed silent, trapped between guilt and a yearning I couldn't deny. He stepped closer, the air between us electric, until he was right beside my bed. "Just tell me to go and I will," he said, his voice steady yet soft, resolute. But the words never left my lips. Instead, I led him near, and in that moment, I realized I had crossed the line again. My body acted before my mind could intervene. Every instinct of reason drowned beneath the pull of desire. I felt his warmth even before he touched me. When his hand brushed my face, the world narrowed until it existed only between us. His lips met mine. And it was like a spark igniting a storm within me. Something urgent, something untamed. His movements were a careful balance of passion and tenderness, stripping away the defenses I had built. My hands sought him instinctively, tracing the contours of his strength, memorizing the hardness beneath his skin. He didn't hesitate, he guided the intensity, letting it rise without restraint. His touch traveled with purpose, sliding along my neck, drawing shivers that left me breathless. In that charged silence, nothing else mattered: time, consequence, morality. All faded into the shadows as we surrendered to the moment, caught in a tension that was both terrifying and irresistible. A few days later, Daniel returned from his trip, his presence filling the house with its usual calm authority. His smile, broad and confident, seemed almost cruel in contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Every casual word he spoke about contracts and negotiations made my chest tighten. A reminder that life at home was shifting beneath my feet. Lucas, sitting casually on the living room couch, met his father's gaze with practiced composure. "Yeah. Everything's fine, Dad. Thanks for letting me stay here." His tone was effortless, but I could see the subtle tension in the way he shifted. The slight edge in his smile that hinted at secrets unspoken. I tried to steady myself, forcing my hands to remain still. Trying to breathe through the sudden knot of anxiety. The house felt smaller somehow. The walls closing in as if they were listening to every thought I couldn't speak. Then my phone buzzed, a message from Sophia.
Hima.
"I can't keep going like this. I've decided to move away for a while. I need space." Relief and sadness collided in my chest. Her departure would change the dynamics at home. And yet it also left a new emptiness, a quiet tension that I could feel in the air, unspoken and pressing. Lucas's presence was sharper now, somehow more intense. Though entirely innocent in form. Our interactions, once easy, now carried weight. Every glance, every word, every subtle gesture felt magnified. A silent reminder of the complexities swirling beneath the surface. As Daniel leaned back in his chair, unaware of the storm, I realized that the house had changed. Nothing would ever be the same, and the next few days would test the boundaries of trust, loyalty, and the hidden emotions that had been quietly simmering.